Hi, my name is Jayanti Mukherjee. As a part of this I Think Biology NPTEL course, today, this week, we are going to talk about ecological interactions. So, let's get started. This lectures, which is Introduction to Ecological Interactions, we will look at ecological integrity. So, how life is integrated with each other and with the environment. Okay, and this we will look at through ecological pyramids, food chains, food web. We are not going to talk too much about food chains and food webs, as you already know, you have an idea about that, but more into ecological pyramids. Then we will go into more specific interactions, how different species interact in nature by benefiting or harming each other. So we are aware or that there are some negative interactions, there are some positive interactions. So how these things work in nature, and then to understand how these interactions have helped species to diversify. That is most important thing, or the take home from this lecture, that not only these interactions are happening, these interactions have significantly determined how evolutionary pathways proceed, and how speciation occurs in nature, and develop unique features and strategies in species that we see today. Okay, so let's get started. Let's start with this figure. How are species organized? So, at the very base or the inner circle, you can see individuals. Individuals are the basic unit of uh, life. I won't say it's a basic unit of life. Of course, cell is the basic unit of life, and there are organelles which are also freely living. But individuals are the ones that are basic unit of form and function, and in a very integrated form. So they themselves, an individual themselves, has a very integrated form and function, right? So at the base, they are individuals. And now, if I tell you to guess, what would be the interactions within individuals, right? How do they interact? Just think while we are progressing into the lecture. The next form are populations. Populations are the, so few individuals, say 100 individuals together within an area, interacting with them, as well as reproducing, producing offsprings, and that area, the atmosphere or the climate weather in that area is actually influencing their adaptation in that area. So individuals in that population in area 1 is definitely different or has more different kinds of variation than individuals within a population 2 in area 2. So that is the integration. Next level is the integration of population. Above that are species. Of course, many individual populations will consist of a species. Very good example are the humans. We have occupied the whole globe, and we are still considered as a single species. But we have several different populations, and look at how much variations we have, right? In Africa, people look completely different compared to Asia, compared to North Americas and European countries, right? So populations in different areas have shaped that population very differently than others. Then that next level are communities. What are communities? So in a very human term, we often understand, say, I live in Bangalore. I can always say the community of Bangalore. But more or less, what people will understand is we are talking about human community. It's gated community, or it's a very local community. But in ecological terms, it is more or less same, but slightly different. In ecological community, now we are talking about interaction or biotic interactions which are coming together. So many different species coming together. When we talk about interaction, or when we talk about a Bangalore ecological community, Then we are talking about the humans there, we are talking about the birds there, we are talking about the plants there, the dogs, the cats, and everything, the bats, the insects, everything that exists in that community. So those are the biotic interactions. Now take another level up, which are ecosystems. Ecosystems has one thing extra. I'm sure you all have learned about this, and that is the abiotic component. So when communities interact with their abiotic environment, that forms the ecosystem. So you're not going to only talk about ecosystem. Whenever ecosystem we talk about, it has a shape and a form, and ecosystems differ in how they look, right? And that is because of their abiotic factors, the influence of the abiotic factors. Next stage would be the biomes. So I'm sure you already know the definition of biomes. All the ecosystems over the globe, all the similar kind of ecosystem over the globe forms the biomes. For example, I can say forest biome, and that would mean a particular definition of forest, and wherever they are present around the globe, all those areas comprise the forest biome. Similarly, the desert biome, similarly the pond biome or river biome, anything of that sort. So this is the form of integration in and how organisms or creatures interact. So now let's take it to the next level. If we talk about individuals, we are talking about the science who studies these organisms are called organismal biologists. The next level is population ecology, people who studies population, fluctuation in population, the how population dynamics is maintained, what are the conditions, all comes in population ecology. Then we come into community ecology, the next level, where species, communities, and ecosystems falls also partly, where organisms actually interact with themselves. So, for example, the concept of niche, the concept of all the ecological interactions, competition and predation that we are going to talk about in a while. So, these all comes under community ecology. Next step would be ecosystem ecology, which is very integrated form, not only looking at the community but also at the ecosystem. So what is the nutrient influx? What is the nutrient outflux from the system? How is this phosphorus cycle, nitrogen cycle, and all these cycles that we know of are influencing these organisms and their interactions in an ecosystem? So these are what ecosystem ecology studies, and it's a very, very important field of research, especially currently when we talk about climate and climate impacts on organisms and communities. Now, just to wrap up from here, we will say that ecosystem, a community is a group of populations of different species living close enough to interact with each other, and this different species is important to keep in mind. And here we are emphasizing more on the biotic interaction between different types of organisms in an area. And ecosystems, as we already talked about, are a community of organisms including different life forms interacting with its non-living components or the abiotic components. Here both interaction between abiotic and biotic is emphasized. So now let's see how these things are organized. And every one of you in the audience knows what this is, right? Yes, it's an ecological pyramid. And we all know this is a ecological, more or less summing up the ecological pyramid of biomass, where we have at the basal section the producers or the autotrophs, generally the plants, land plants, water plants, whatever you say, whichever organisms are producing food by, are capable of producing food by themselves. They are mostly the autotrophs. Second would be the primary consumers, which actually feed on these autotrophs. And in the next slide, when we talk a little bit more detail, we will see how these actually works, right? So primary consumers, if producers or autotrophs, if you go is a grass, a primary consumer is a cow. If a primary consumer is a cow, then the secondary consumer would be what? Secondary consumer could be a tiger or a lion, even that, even though they are wild animals, but I'm just giving you an example. So later you will understand why this example is important. Then the tertiary consumers. So tertiary consumers can also sometimes they are also the apex predator like tiger or lion, or they can be vultures or eagles, which actually also not only they feed on carcasses, so they are kind of decomposers with circle backs to every strata. That decomposers will eat primary consumers also, secondary consumers also, and also they will feed on carcasses. Okay, so this is how it is tied up. And parasites, as I have put parasites on the side, you are seeing parasites can affect all these different levels of ecosystem, right? So if you take this as a basis, now let's proceed to the next slide. This is what you have been studying, right? Decrease in biomass from bottom level to higher level, giving it a pyramid shape. Now let's take a keen look at this. Okay, in the producers, here we have tree, grass, flowering plants, crops. So till now, whenever, that's why my previous slides become relevant. Till now, whenever we have been talking or thinking about pyramid, we always think that grasshopper is eating grass, or something is eating the producer. So if you see this particular two basal strata, the producers, you have tree, butterflies don't eat tree, grasshoppers don't eat tree, right? So grasshoppers definitely eat grass, but butterflies don't eat grass. Butterflies don't eat flowering plants. They don't even eat crops. Similarly, ants, they feed definitely some parts of it, but they don't eat fully. So why have we put it here? The basic concept is the energy transfer, right? So grass is taking atmospheric carbon dioxide, solar energy, and they are producing food, carbohydrate, right? That carbohydrate is available in various different forms. For example, if a grasshopper is eating grass, it is given in a structural component. So they are actually eating the cellulose or anything that have given the grass a structural component. On the other hand, butterflies are not herbivore of that kind, but they are still feeding on the nectar of flowering plants, which is also sucrose, a part of the carbohydrate. So they are also getting the energy from these flowering plants. So not to confuse, all these different organisms are falling under primary consumers, whether they fully consume or partly just consume these autotrophs, right? Secondary consumers, rats, sparrow, frog. So of course, another thing, very important thing to keep in mind, that the biomass is decreasing from bottom to top and not the other way around. For example, one sparrow can eat lots of grasshoppers, and it's not that lots of grass and lots of sparrows can eat one grasshopper. Okay, so everything now, when we go up, it's the energy requirement. How much energy does a sparrow need, and how many grasshoppers can fulfill that energy requirement? So let's then talk about pyramid of energy. As you can see, primary producers, if you consider the energy they contain is 100%, only 10% of that is getting transferred to the next level of primary consumers. Okay, so they are taking solar energy, they are doing productivity, everything is happening. Only 10% is getting transferred to the next level. Another next level now. Another only 10% of the primary consumers are the secondary consumers that they are getting. Okay. So this is how the energy is actually reducing. Why? Because 99% of the solar energy is lost by plants. 100% they are producing. You can see 99% of the solar energy is lost. Either through their own respiration or something they are doing, it is lost. Only 1% is going for gross primary productivity. Okay. And of course, gross primary productivity also includes net primary productivity and then respiration. So you can see only 40% of that 1% is utilized for net primary production. And from that, other 60% is lost in respiration. Okay? Plants also respire. It's not that only animals do. Plants also respire. So that is 60% gone. That is how only 10% is going to, only that much 1% is going to the next level. So this is how the pyramid of energy is integrated. And if you think a bit more about this, then I can ask you a question. Why do elephants eat a lot? It's not that I am going to answer this question here completely because it's actually a very complicated thing. Elephants normally in average they are 4 tons, like 4 tons of weight. But their food requirements, I think they eat probably 150 kilo per day each individual. A mature side elephant. So, but scientists have seen that most of it, almost 70% of it is they are actually utilizing, whereas 60 to 70%, whereas 30 to 40% is just waste. Okay, and they also excrete a lot, right? So their energy requirement is fulfilled through 150 kilo of biomass of plants. But why do they eat a lot? Because lot of the plant's nutrition is not fulfilled through a smaller amount of biomass. So lot of the plant biomass they are eating is also waste. So this is the question which is driving everything, food chain, food web relationship and everything that is integrated. So food chains are an integrated relationship between body mass, energy requirement and metabolic rate or digestive efficiency. And this question is what drives how grasshoppers are eating, how many grasshoppers are eating them, how many lizards are eating these grasshoppers, as well as how many kites are eating the lizards. So by this what I mean is that this length of this food chain, say this is a food chain. The length of this food chain will depend on the energetic efficiency and requirement, digestive efficiency and the requirement of energy of these organisms. Okay, so who eats what and how big are these food chain or how vast are these food web will depend on that. Okay, for example, if you see if the grasses are highly nutritious or some plant they are using which is highly nutritious, then small amount of biomass of the plant only should suffice for the grasshopper. Okay, they don't need to eat locusts, doesn't need to devour the whole environment. They can eat little bit and they can be happy. So like that it depends what eats what and how they can digest it. So now you can think about, ponder more on this question and go and read it up because it's a very interesting question that a lot of researchers ask. Now let's go to the different interactions that we know, which is the main topic of this lecture. So I've started with negative, that is fine. and then the positive interactions. Competition, where member one, you can see it's a two level we are seeing just now, just two member. Competition which is harming both the members. In fact, one is competing and the one who is enduring that competition. Okay, because one is competing, that is also there is a cost to that competition. Okay. Predation is one is benefiting, one is eating the whole thing, and the next other member is fully either dying or severely their fitness or survival is reduced. Herbivory, which is mostly plant specific, it's kind of known as the predation in plants. So that is similar as predation. We will talk about it a bit. Parasitism also, it is now coming to a symbiotic relationship. Negative symbiosis. Symbiosis means when two organisms live very close to each other, like in association with each other. Then the next is amensalism. You have heard of amensalism and commensalism. So one here is negatively impacted, whereas other is neither harmed or nothing happens to them. Next will be positive. Positive mutualism. Mutualism again, both are positively impacted. So both are benefiting from here. Bee pollinator, very best example of mutualism. Dr. Divya is going to talk about fig wasp and figs, which is actually very good example of mutualism. And she will also talk about parasitism. Okay. So then we come to facilitation. Here both mutualism is also another form of symbiosis where two organisms actually live very close association. Whereas facilitation mostly have been seen in plants under different conditions, so it's not very talked about, but it still exists in nature. And the opposite of amensalism, which is commensalism, where one organism is benefited, whereas the other is not impacted much. Okay, so now let's take a look at in depth what are these.